As we come into autumn and winter, this sort of time of year, where we are now about mid-November, there's certain tactics and bits and bobs that I'll start to change and look into. Depending on what type of lake of that around venue I'm at, I'll start to look into whether it's a warm winds or not, whether I'll get onto winds or not, or get on the back of them a lot more. As we start going into sort of December, I'll start looking at using maggots, a lot of crumb, a sweeter bait, like a nutty type creamy bait, lots of crumb, put some liquids through it perhaps, or you got corn, casters and other baits like that are good proven winter baits. At this particular time, just before that, I like to use tigers at this time. Tiger with hemp or with buckwheat as I have today, mixed in with a bit of the boilie, just to let it soak in some of the juices. I've added extra sugar into the tiger nuts after I've boiled them, and I've put it in front of my radiator in the garage just to help ferment the boilies, the tigers up a little bit more, getting off real sweetness. And I've had some good hits of fish, you know, in November from different venues, including, you know, Farlows, Orchid. You know, if I haven't got a winter campaign at water such as Farlows or Orchid that got a bit of winter form, somewhere that I'll go and target. Last year, for instance, I did 4 trips, I think, down Farlows, consisting of 12 nights in totals, across December, January and February. I ended up with 23 carp, including 630s up to 37 12s. So in 4 trips, it's a nice little stamp of fish to go and have. And that was, you know, looking at weather fronts coming in. A couple of those hits were actually on a wind in January and February, but it was 10 degrees, a storm coming through, a low pressure front, and the fish were just getting on it. And I love managing to locate them in a certain bay where the wind was blowing. And on a couple of occasions, I had the bait to myself because everyone's fishing the main bowl, expecting them to be out there, and they've actually followed the wind. And I've prejudged that by looking at the conditions that we got, the warm temperatures, the warm winds, which are actually warmer than the water temperatures, so the fish will follow those winds in winter. But equally, you know, if the temperature's cold and it's a northerly wind, they'll quite happily back right off it. And it's just looking at your different conditions that you've got to look at to see what suits the particular session you've got or when you've got. If you can your time, if you can judge on your time on only at weekends, then look at your weather beforehand if you can. If you're lucky enough, if you're self-employed and you can go fishing when you want to go fishing, then you can go around the weather fronts and time your fishing to suit it. As we all know, wind direction is hugely important, and in winter it can be even more important, especially right in the middle of winter. One thing I try to look for is whether the air temperature and therefore the wind temperature is warmer than the water temperature. When we get these warm days, generally these big southerlies, you know, you get your 10 degrees days, big storms come in, it's that warmer than the water temperature. Quite often they'll get onto it, especially other days when you've got the sun out, and if you've got a bit of a wind on it, the sun will warm it up quicker if there's a wind on it, because it actually doubles the surface area of the water. It has that kind of effect. So with the sun coming out, direct sunlight, it will warm it up very quickly, and quite often fish will move on that quickly. And I've had some good hits, especially at Farlows, preempting that move, where people have been down fishing that swim in the wrong conditions, catching nothing, and I've moved in there after them and managed to catch because of the right conditions. It's reading why a swim is fishing well in the winter is just as important as getting into that swim, you know, which can often be quite hard on these day tickets anyway. The type of spots I'll look for in winter will depend on the area of the lake that I'm fishing and the conditions that I'm fishing in. But in general, I'll try and look for deeper, siltier areas. you know, where this is where you'll find a lot of your bloodworm and the things that the carp are feeding on. Certainly up until, you know, the turn of the year, you know, 1st of January, they're the areas I'd look towards. After January the 1st, I do look into a bit of zig fishing if the lake allows it, because usually that's when the water temperature's got is pretty much as low as it's going to get, and they tend to rise up and down in the layers a lot more. But failing that, if they don't allow that, then, you know, again, looking at the winds and what direction they're going, and if they're warm, the fish are moving on them. If it's blowing into a shallow area of the lake, a shallow bay, don't be afraid to fish in 3 or 4 foot of water in January or February. I mean, if they're in there in the day, on a sunny day, you can have quick little hits at that time of year. Just by a few hours fishing in the right place can get you some extra fish, even if at night them fish move out and you fish for them in a different swim. But that move a couple of moves in a day can catch you being on the fish in the daytime in one swim, as well as being on the fish in the night time in a different swim. As the conditions change, the fish move. Looking for, you know, an area, even swims that have got both, a bit of both, so the carp haven't got to work hard between the deep, safe areas to the shallow, warming up areas. These swims are areas that I'll look for in winter on certain lakes. I do a bit of day ticket fishing in the winter, but for instance on this winter I'm doing a campaign on a water up in Yorkshire called Tyram Hall. I've never fished this far north, but there's a fish up here called Baby Baz. It's £53 and it's a really, really nice carp. It's one I'd like in the album. And at the minute I'm catching nothing. I've had a real bad start to it, but it's well known for not fishing in October, which is when I joined, 1st of October. And I lost one my first session actually, within a couple of hours getting my rods out, but fortunately since then I've done a few blanks. I'm now on my 5th session and still nothing to report, but there's only been 4 carp caught in 6 weeks. And usually it's about this time of the year that the bowler said to me it will pick back up again. I think the falling leaves, there's a lot of trees on this lake. I think that has a lot of effect to it. It will have a pH change in the water, and I've seen in the past lots of other lakes that if they're covered in trees can have a little lull period this time of year, but hopefully it'll all pick back up, because at the minute I'm going through trying to find something that works where nothing seems to be working. I've tried baiting and weighting, moving around quickly on them, zigs, bright singles, little and often baiting with boilies, just catapulting. Casting at the odd showing fish I have seen, which has been few and far between. Nothing's worked so far, but I feel I'm doing everything right to try and work things out. And sometimes when you're doing a winter campaign, that's what you've got to do. You've got to go through all the different things and work them out. Staying up at night, quite often this time of year they're showing at night. That can be a big edge over a lot of other anglers if they're sleeping. If you have a few hours sleep in the day, you can manage to stay up, you know, till 2 or 3 in the morning. I've caught a lot of carp finding out where they are or where they're sitting and heading, and moved on to them and caught fish very, very quickly when the lake's been barren of bites for a while. So, you know, to be reactive and just try and be different, and try everything. The type of rigs I use will differ depending on the type of bottom I'm fishing. If I'm fishing over like gravel or hard ground where you get a real good thump hard down, I like to try and fish like a wafter type rig, but sometimes that can be a Ronnie, but I'll tie the Ronnie slightly differently. Instead of doing a loop knot to the swivel, I'll tie directly to the swivel so that there's no chance of the hook falling back on itself as it settles down with the wafter, whereas if it's on a pop-up I'll fish it with the loop knot so that it's got the extra movement because it's always going to be sat upright. Whereas if I'm fishing like in the silt, where I get a nice soft drop on it, I'll generally go for a helicopter setup and I'll lift the bead up depending on how soft the drop is. If it's really soft, I'll perhaps move it 6 inches up or so, or perhaps even more. But if it's relatively soft, you know, usually 3 inches is enough to allow the lead to plug and your rig to just be presented nicely on top. And quite often I'll fish a pop-up presentation on that, which may be a Ronnie or perhaps a hinge stiff or multi-rig presentation, whichever you're more confident in. I just think using the correct rig for the correct reasons, or the correct type of rig for the correct reasons, rather than what particular rig is the important bit. Whatever you're confident in is what I would say to go and use in that situation. Baiting and more importantly, bait application can be hugely important in winter. If I'm going to my day ticking waters, generally speaking, if I can, I'll try and fish a maggot approach, usually with corn added into the mix, with some crumb, and you know, usually a sweet liquid over the crumb, quite a sweet nutty type bait, a winter type bait. And what I generally do, if I find the area I want to fish, I will probably put out, you know, half a dozen spawns, maybe 10, just to start with, to put a bit of a base there, and then top it up on a little and often basis as I start to get bites. You know, for instance, on Farlows, I had 10 bites one night across a 15-hour period in darkness, and I was constantly topping up every time I got a bite with another 3 spawns. And if I didn't get a bite within a couple of hours, I'd do another 3 spawns just to try and encourage a bite, just a little and often, and not a lot of food value there with just the crumb, the maggot and the corn, and it's just enough to keep topping the swim up and keep the bites coming, hopefully. In other situations where I'm fishing maybe a lower stocked water, I should perhaps sit on an area for a while, or even do little PVA bags of maggots. I try different tactics to see that the winning one on the day can be sometimes the best way to do it. Often a lot of lakes either don't respond to maggots, or maggots are banned on that particular venue. If that's the case, you know, if you like with boilies, a little edge with boilies I'd do, because I get my bait made by a company for me, I ask them to boil it for a little bit less time than what they would do normally. With doing that, I've been using a new bait, which is incredibly soft. I've only had this boiled for 40 seconds for the 20 mil and 30 seconds for the 16 mil, and it's like paste. And the reason for this is that within about 48 hours in most depths of water, a bit deeper water, it'll break down quicker because of the pressure, but it'll break down to like a mush on the bottom, and so that everything can eat it, you know, your small roach and everything. And I want something that if the carp aren't going to eat, it's still going to be there later on. You know, the flavour's going to be there still into the bottom, and also it's not going to rot and sit down the bottom. The little fish will get rid of it, all of it, but the flavour will still be there. So that's one of my tactics I've been trying, but nothing as yet. So, you know, I want to try a lot of different things. That's one thing I've done. This week I talked about crumb on other baits, but I've actually got, you can see here, some crumb. Now, because I've had the bait not boiled for so long, it looks more like a paste than a crumb. But once that's out there, that will break down quite quickly. I'd imagine within about 12 hours that will be broke down to like a conventional crumb as we know it. And what I've done, I did that at home in the blender, and I've put some liquids for it. For this bait, I've put some betaine in it, because it's a garlic bait, and it's got a bit of betaine in it. But I'd use like a cloudy nut liquid, or a nut syrup, something sweet, Scopex perhaps, something, anything along them lines, you know, something a bit winterised. So that's that tactic. I've also this week been trying a particle that's not well known, but it's buckwheat. Now, a lot of us struggle to get good hemp nowadays. It's really hard to get hold of, and this is just a bit larger. Tastes very much the same, very sweet, very oily, and it's something a friend of mine put me on to probably a year or two ago now, and it's something I've been using using since, and it, like I say, it's got that crunch factor of the hemp and everything, and it's very large. It's probably twice the size of the biggest hemp you can get nowadays. So that I've been using in conjunction. It goes very slimy, a bit like Tigers as well, which is why I'm using it alongside Tigers as well, which is in my third bucket. Now with these Tigers, what I've done, they are really gloopy, because I've added 2 kilo of sugar, 1 kilo of icing sugar, and 1 kilo of demerara sugar. I've added them both after the boiling process, after they've cooling down, and what I do is put them in front of the radiator or something like that for 3 or 4 days before fishing, to just help the fermentation process, just to help it along. I've got a lot of them are smaller ones, but there are some larger ones mixed in amongst it to really get them grubbing, different size baits, and then that's a tactic I'm trying at the minute. I've been fishing for 48 hours with this tactic. Unfortunately nothing as yet, but I have had a couple of liners. I've seen a couple of fish in the area, so I am going to stick at it. I've got 2 more nights, I've got 4 nights fishing this week, so I'm going to stick at it. That's why I'm going to do the old bait and weight approach, and I can learn, if this doesn't work, I've been trying singles, different bits, but it's keep trying different things until I can find a winning tactic. And some of that might just go from having, one bite all of a sudden, and then next thing I've had 5 or 6 quickly because I've found what works. Sometimes you just got to keep adapting until you find what it is that is working. Bite indication again can be a big thing in winter. I generally will try and keep as high a setting on my alarm as I can. Obviously in rough weather sometimes we have to knock it down a setting or 2, but I'll try and keep it more sensitive, because you're picking up that little bit of movement, sometimes that extra line bite, that extra finicky bite. Quite often you don't get rippers in winter. Quite often it pulls up to the top and holds there, or even I've had real finicky takes where it's 2 or 3 bleeps and you see the tip knock and I've hit it. It's worth keeping, if you get 2 or 3 beeps in winter, it's worth getting out your bivvy and having a look. Especially zig fishing, 2 or 3 beeps is generally hit it. So you've got to look into this in winter, especially because the carp's metabolism slows down, they're moving less. Again, when it comes to looking for shows, quite often they're very small. They're not flying out like they are in summer, full of energy. They can often be little head pokes that you're looking for. So you're trying to keep an eye on the water for that. Sometimes the birds can give it away. Maybe spooking as they come back up. Can give me the presence of a carp below. I spook them. Or if grebes are hunting in a certain area of the lake more than others, is that because the small fish are drawn to that area? Is that, if the small fish are drawn to that area, is there a reason? Is that because the temperature's a bit better in that area, or a bit nicer to sit there? And if so, the carp will probably be drawn to the same area as well. Through watching areas, I've seen the grebes dive in the past, just by watching that bit of water for a half-hour period while on a lap of the lake. I've seen a subtle show in amongst them, and it's give the game away. I've moved on it and I've caught fish. Little signs like that can mean the difference between going home with a blank and going home with several fish in your way under you. Because in winter, especially on these high stock day ticket pits, if you get on them, I had it where I had 10 takes in 9 hours on Farlows, just because it was just the conditions were right, it was bang on, and the fish up to 35 pounds. These are big fish. Location is everything in winter, everything and more. And if you can locate them, get on them, as quickly as you can, or get as close as you can to them, which it can be hard in day ticket fishing. It's hard for every single one of us, but if you can time it, maybe there's a weather front coming in, maybe get there a day or 2 before, if it's possible. Just try and go that little extra mile to just give you that little bit extra over your next angle on the bank, and put you a few extra fish on the bank. I've actually chose 3 different types of spots for this session because I wasn't doing a bait and waiting approach. I wanted to choose different areas, and the reason I chose this swim, it gives me a lot of access to different areas of water. I've got one rod that's over there, which I've chose it to go on that particular spot because I've got a good line laying between 2 raised areas between it, which I managed to find by looking on Google Earth. There's a gap in between these 2 bars that isn't, you wouldn't necessarily see that without looking on Google Earth. So I always try to look on it when I can do. As you can, you can learn some bits straight away before you even cast a lead into the water. And what I've done on that one, I've found a gravel area. It comes up to about 6 foot, and then it just drops off into silt about 10 to 11 foot, which then I know runs all the way along that back channel, which is all 10, 11, 12 foot silt. So I've just come just off the left end of the gravel. There's a bit of a feature there, and for any fish that are moving through the back channel to go into the different part of the lake, the other side of the island, I know that it's very shallow in between the bank and the island this side, so I'm expecting them with this weather, if they are moving up and down between the 2, they're more likely to use that far back. So that was there, and I've put quite a bit of bait on that spot, a good sort of 20-25 large spombs of mixed boilie, tigers and buckwheat. And then on another rod in the middle here, I've done something totally different, which is just to the right of this swim here. Again, it's a continuation of these bars where there's a break in them and it starts again. They fully finish here, and there's a big 12-foot bowl where it's about 12 foot all of water before you got the other bars on the other side. So I'll put it right at the end of this bow. It comes along for several feet. It goes from 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot, 7 foot, and also just drops straight down into 12. So I've gone pretty much right on the end of that for anything that might be used in the gravel bars as patrol routes. And then finally on my 3rd rod to the left, we've got a big plateau, which again you can see on Google Earth, that runs all the way up to the left of my swim and goes to the far side of the lake. And on the edge of those plateaux there's lily pads, so right on the side of the lily pads is where it drops off, and I found right at the very bottom of the drop it's a very nice very smooth sort of silt, almost going into the probably being fed on quite a bit, going into gravel. So that's where I put my rod, which is just off the edge of the lily pads as well. So that's just on the drop off over here. And again I've put that on just buckwheats and tigers, again another 20 or 25 spomfuls, really giving them a little bit to sit on. Spomming on here being a small lake, I expected it wouldn't do it any favours, so I haven't spommed. I put out a lot to start with the intention of not making much disturbance other than the odd recast of rods. And I've left my rods so far for 48 hours. I am going to redo them today, but I'm going to redo them and probably leave them for another 48 hours till I go home, unless I've hopefully got a reason to move them and catch a fish. This is my take on winter fishing, whether it be a one-off basis on a high stock day ticket lake, or whether it's a campaign on a low stock water like I'm fishing now. These are my thoughts on it, and if you'd like to keep in contact with me and see how I'm getting along, then you can follow me on Facebook or on Instagram at clark.marcus, and or follow me on Prologic via their social media site plus a YouTube channel, and see how I get along. And with 2 days left of this session and having just seen a fish show, it might well happen for us. Here's hoping.